The Hasselblad Xpan is an absolutely amazing and distinct film camera. It was first released in 1998, and while regular film cameras have a 24 by 36 millimeter frame, the Xpan has a cinematic 24 by 65 millimeter frame. It is almost twice the width of a regular frame. Its uniqueness makes it a very collectible camera. Let's take a look at the 10 things you need to know about the Hasselblad Xpan. First and foremost, the Xpan is a rangefinder camera. Rangefinders are known for their accurate manual focusing and have a separate window that you look through. In that window, there is a circle in the center of the frame which has two images in it. When you focus the lens, one of the images moves, and when they line up, the image is in focus. The viewfinder of the Xpan doesn't show shutter speeds or aperture or anything else. To see the shutter speed on the Xpan, you have to look on the back of the camera. If the shutter speed is low, there is a red light in the viewfinder to warn you of that low shutter speed. This was updated in the newer Xpan 2, so you can see the shutter speed and exposure information in the viewfinder. The Xpan is known for its cinematic frame of 24 by 65 millimeters. However, you can change from cinematic panorama to a regular 35 millimeter frame easily. With the flip of a switch, you can now capture a regular 24 by 36 millimeter image. When you switch, the frame counter will adjust to the new number of frames at that setting, and you can continue to switch back and forth. The Xpan has three lenses in the system, the 30mm, 45mm, and 90mm. Because lens focal lengths are often expressed in diagonal field of view, it isn't easy to directly compare the diagonal field of view of the longer 65mm width of the Panoramic Xpan frame and the shorter regular 35mm frame. That is why each lens has an equivalent focal length when compared to regular 35mm film. The 30mm f5.6 lens has a diagonal field of view of 94 degrees, which is equivalent to a 17mm lens in the 35mm format. The 45mm f4 lens is equivalent to a 25mm lens in the 35mm format and has an 81-degree diagonal field of view. Finally, the 90mm f4 lens has a diagonal field of view of 44 degrees and is equivalent to a 50mm lens on a 35mm camera. Something you might not know is that the overlay display in the viewfinder changes when different lenses are put onto the Xpan. Here is a scene with a 45mm lens. You can see the lines which show the framing of the image. Here is the same scene with a 90mm lens on the camera. See how the lines are different than the 45mm lens? In addition to that, the overlay display in the viewfinder adapts when you switch from panoramic to regular 35mm framing, so you can accurately frame your image. The 30mm lens was announced in 1999, a year after the 45mm and 90mm lenses. The 30mm has a separate viewfinder that attaches to the top of the camera and allows you to compose your image. The viewfinder is only used for composition. You still need to use the other viewfinder window on the camera to focus. When the 30mm lens first came out, it cost more than the Xpan with a 45mm lens. Nowadays, the 30mm lens sells used for more than the original cost to purchase one new. But when you factor in inflation, you are still paying around the same amount or more for a used 30mm lens than you would for a new one more than 20 years ago. This unique camera actually has a twin. The Xpan was made in collaboration with Fujifilm, and they released their own version of the Xpan called the Fujifilm TX-1. The TX-1 was released and sold in Japan, and the Xpan was sold everywhere else in the world. You can use Xpan lenses on the TX-1. The TX-1 has a very distinct silver titanium finish. Both cameras were updated in 2003 to the Xpan 2 and the TX2. Did you know that you can use Xpan lenses on some modern digital cameras which have larger sensors? One option is the Hasselblad X1D or the X2D or the Fujifilm GFX series like the 50R. You just need to use an adapter to attach it to your camera. I use the clip-on adapter to mount the lens on my Fujifilm GFX 50R. I can actually set my GFX 50R to capture images in panoramic format, and it works brilliantly. My GFX lenses are a lot bigger than the Xpan lenses, so I really love the size of the Xpan lenses on my 50R, and it's a lot of fun to shoot digital images with these lenses. When you put a roll of film into the Xpan, it winds the whole film out, and when you capture each shot, it winds the film back into the canister. If you accidentally open the back of the camera, you won't lose any images. It also means that the frame numbers are backwards, and your first shots are on the last numbers on your roll of film. According to Hasselblad, there are around 16,800 original Xpans made between 1998 and 2002. Then the Xpan 2 came out in 2003 and only 5,500 of these were made. This is less than a third of the number of original Xpans. The digital revolution was happening, and according to Hasselblad, new EU regulations came into effect in 2006 that banned certain elements from being used in cameras, so it would have required an extensive rebuild of the camera. So there aren't a lot of Xpans out there. With so many unique features, the Xpan is truly a distinctive and incredibly special camera. I feel lucky to have the opportunity to own and use one. Before I got an Xpan, I used my Fujifilm GFX 50R to capture panoramic images. If you're interested, check out my videos about capturing digital panoramic photos with the 50R. It is always extremely enjoyable to explore and look at the world in a panoramic format. I start to see panoramic possibilities everywhere I look. The Xpan really does change the way I look at the world. If you like the content I'm creating, please consider subscribing. Thanks so much.